All right, for our next guest, this isn't his first rodeo. So strap in for a turbocharged ride with the Chief Marketing Maverick at Cowboy. With over 2 decades of experience in the fashion fast lane, he's the brains behind Rodnik and a former pilot of Just So. Catch his talk to crack the digital code behind brand brilliance, and he will guide you through his journey and share some invaluable marketing wisdom. Discover how his strategies are transforming brands in the wild, wild west of today's marketplace. Please join me in giving an applause for Richard Ascott.
Hello.
Hey. Hey, Rich, welcome. And as you can see, we provided the most comfortable seats of the house today. So, but with this dress, maybe not the best
give it a
idea.
Go. Step through.
Although it's a good idea to maybe promote, instead of only using Cowboy for going to work, also to going to galas and conferences.
Exactly.
No, please take a seat,
Thank you.
Richard. Thank you so much for being here today with the Eurostar.
Yes.
So, what inspired the story of Cowboy? What inspired you to create that brand?
Well, first thing to say is thank you for having us. Thanks for being here. Cowboy's a Belgian brand. I don't know if everyone knows it. So it's an e-bike brand, proudly Belgian. And this is a festival, I think, that is super exciting in terms of what it's doing. And so it's a pleasure to be here. So the story of Cowboy, I guess, is 3 incredible founders who had an idea when they were working across 2 different businesses. One was an on-demand, like a Deliveroo competitor, and the other was essentially an Uber competitor. And the interesting thing, this is back in 2012, the interesting thing with the Deliveroo competitor called Take Eat Easy, which was a Belgian company, was that they realized very quickly that cars delivering food was not actually a very efficient way of getting products to people, getting food to people. And so naturally bikes became a good solution. And they then noticed that the guys who were on e-bikes, which was still quite an early thing back then, were actually making more money than everyone else. They were faster, they were more efficient. And that was better for the guys waiting for their curry. It was better for the company and better for the riders. And so they had this kind of idea that everyone should go on e-bikes, but none of the riders wanted to go on e-bikes because they weren't really cool enough. And all those kind of courier guys are quite cool. Yeah. And so they had this initial vision. What if we could create an e-bike that was super desirable, that people, especially a younger group of people, would want to ride? And then the simple thing, I could go on, but essentially they took all of that know-how in terms of understanding of logistics and what it is to know about traffic movement through cities and being connected and maps and theft and safety and all of that stuff. And they layered it on top of this sort of connected layer to this beautiful product. And the rest is,
It's
history so far. Yeah,
yeah, indeed. But I mean, like you already addressed, e-bikes weren't cool. Like a while ago, they still had this dusty image. But Cowboy really succeeded in making e-bikes cool. So marketing also played a crucial role there. And you are actually a bit of a marketing guru, I can say. So can you explain to me, what did you do with the marketing of Cowboy that made it such a successful brand?
I mean, look, the first thing to say is that, that I inherited an incredible platform, an incredible start. So we have in our CEO someone who really values and understands brand and really values and understands design. And the most famous example of that, is obviously someone like a Steve Jobs. If you have someone who really cares about brand and aesthetic that sits at the top of a company, then it's a lot easier for everyone in the company. That cascades through. So that was the first thing. From my point of view, when I joined the business, I spoke to the board and I presented to the board, and my view was that the bike industry was I called it a sector of Samsungs, right? We had this category where you have a famous logo, a famous name, which is Samsung, but really it's just a list of features, right? And if you compare someone like Samsung to someone like Apple, the difference is Apple have got a halo effect. They stand for something. They've got creativity. They've got thinking differently. And when you have that in your brand, you can communicate on the elements of the brand and the values. If you have just features, then every time you want to do a new campaign, you have to talk about new features. And that's really shown. I was looking yesterday. If you look at the Apple website today, you're going to see 4 mobile phones, right? 13, 14, 15, and Pro. If you go on the Samsung website, I don't know if anyone wants to guess how many mobile phones you can buy on the Samsung website today, right? It's 40, 10 times. And so when we looked at the bike category, we thought this is the same. You know, there are no brands where they're communicating through brand and through, you know, the benefits that it brings to customer. And so we started like that, and you know, we went from there.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good analogy, because the same with Cowboy, you're become part of a community. The same with Apple. If you're an Apple user, you have like everything from Apple.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're just not part of the community. Are there ways how you also try to engage people with the community that you have, and how you make them more loyal to your brand?
I mean, I think the answer is yes. I mean, we try very hard, but again, I don't want to sort of, it almost feels like cheating. Like what we're doing at Cowboy almost feels like cheating, in that I've never worked for a brand that is, again, comms director in the front row, it's no disservice, but I've never worked for a brand where it's easier to get press, and I've never worked for a brand where it's easier to get community. And of course we try really hard, and we work really hard to kind of to propagate that and to create events. But Cowboy is a brand that is full of like crazy passionate people. Our crowdfunding sort of rounds, we've got more than 5,000 crowdfunders that have contributed a ton of money to the business and the growth. You know, we've got a beta test group which we have to max at 2,500 people because everyone wants to try the bike. So yeah, community is a huge part of it. And if you're lucky enough to have a groundswell of that, then there's lots of simple things you can do, like events and test rides and all the rest of it, that we can harness that.
Yeah, you already addressed crowdfunding. Of course, crowdfunding, for the people in the audience who are not that familiar with crowdfunding, the best way to also put a community aspect in looking for funding, attracting funding. People like you and me, everyone can have sort of rewards depending on the type of crowdfunding campaign. And that's also something that Cowboy consistently did in looking for funding. You use the platform Crowdcube to do that. Can you tell me maybe a little bit more about the experience that you had with crowdfunding and what impact it has on Cowboy?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a natural next step. Because we had so many passionate people, it was a natural next step to do a crowd round. We've done 5 of them now. Every time we've done it on the back of an institutional raise. So what that means is that the sort of ordinary retail investors can kind of piggyback on the due diligence that like sort of people with more resources can do. But from my own point of view, you know, we all still to this day, I always remember that, you know, we first wore the Nike logo or the Ralph Lauren logo, and we wear those logos because we want to be part of a brand. And I think when the idea of Kickstarter and crowdfunding came along, of course people want to make a return, but they also are proud to own that little piece of the company. And I know you've written about it. I'm sure that you've covered things like this. I mean, our experience has been fantastic. You know, we've always been oversubscribed, and I think it's about giving everyone a chance to sort of be part of it. We have more than 5,000, as I say. They're all on the wall in our HQ in Brussels. So when you walk past,
nice.
There's more than 5,000 tiny little names, but you can read them all if you go up close. Our Brussels store, we have a store in the HQ. So if you go to the store in Brussels, you can read everyone's name who's contributed.
Yeah, becoming part of the crowdfunding and investing in you guys has almost become like getting your ticket for Tomorrowland. You have to be really, really quick, and people are really looking forward to. So nice job there. Now, what I'm wondering, Richard, you come from a career in the fashion and agency life. What made you join an e-bike company?
So, good question. There's a short version and a long version. I'll give you the short version is. The product and the people and the mission. The mission piece, which is for us is about trying to make cycling the most popular vehicle in the home. We're not against cars. We're not against planes. I think that's too binary as a point of view in the way of looking at things. But we definitely think that the car should be the most popular vehicle in every home. And the stat that I always come back to, that I always tell people that sort of blows my mind, is that 12% of all EU carbon emissions, so not road emissions, all EU carbon emissions come from car journeys less than 5 miles long. And so the idea that you could somehow get more people to take shorter journeys, which, let's remember, are like cleaner, greener, quicker, faster, cheaper, is a really powerful thing to move the needle, right? So that's the first little bit of it. The second thing was, my kids were getting older, and they're not that old yet, but I imagine a time where maybe I have grandchildren, and they say to me, hey, Grandpa, when the world was on fire, the world was fucking burning down like 50 years ago. Like, what were you doing? And I felt like most of us would only be able to say, like, oh, well, sometimes we took our own coffee cup to the coffee shop, or most of the time we used our own bag when we went to the supermarket. And so I liked having something to say. So for me, that mission thing was really powerful. And then the final thing I said, it's a bit like cheating. The world of luxury, which is my background, if you define premium as you pay more and you get more, so you pay a little bit more and you get a better product. You pay a little bit more, maybe you get a lot better product. Or in Apple's case, you pay a lot more and you get a little bit of a better product. If you define premium as that, luxury is defined classically as that you pay more but you get the same, or in some cases worse, right? So the utility of a handbag compared to a Vuitton handbag compared to a normal handbag is the same utility, but you're paying a lot more. You could argue a Ferrari, you pay more. And
the value is in the brand.
Right, it's a less good thing. The thing with premium and with Cowboy is it's fundamentally a better product, right? So from my background, it feels like cheating because I've got all this evidence and all this reality to build into the brand. So I love the challenge of it.
Yeah. All right, Grandpa Rich, you're going to tell an amazing story to your grandchildren, without a doubt. Now, which marketing campaign that you did with Cowboy was so good, it resonated so well with your audience, and what do you think are the key ingredients of that crowdfunding, that marketing campaign that made it so successful?
Well, so I think, I've been here 2 years, we've done 4 kind of major campaigns. The most recent one was Tuesday. I'm not sure what day it is anymore, but the most recent one was Tuesday. The first one we did back a couple of years ago, and then this week was for a product called Adaptive Power, and essentially it's what enables the bikes, which are simple, to have no gears, and they operate in a really simple way. And what happens is the bike has a brain and it can think in real time, and it changes the power you need if you're on a hill, or if you've got your kid on the back, or if it's windy. The first thing that we did was we wanted to start behaving like brands like Nike, like Apple, and start thinking about the benefits. We could have talked about the talk center and the comms module and the way that we kind of do 20 calculations a second to deliver. I don't even really understand it, to be honest. But what we decided to talk about was how it felt. And so the first campaign was playing with a kind of conspiracy theory. Earth is flat, wind is fake, gravity doesn't exist. And it was essentially saying, look, this is how it feels to ride a Cowboy with adaptive power. And then the one this week might pip the post for me, which was about when you were a kid, if everyone remembers, you take your coat and you put it around your neck, and it would be like a superhero cloak, and you'd run around, and yes, nodding, and you'd run around. And we like the idea that the power, one of our riders said it's a bit like having a superpower. And so we like the idea that you could take someone who's ordinary and make them extraordinary. And so we just shot this campaign. You can check it out. But where essentially you've got ordinary people in ordinary clothes that have these kind of superheroes. And my last point on this is that in a sort of meta or a doubling down way, we like the idea that if you are on a bike, you are kind of being Batman a little bit. You're slightly changing and saving the world, and so you're kind of a superhero anyway. So yeah, those would jump out.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of metaphors. You guys using metaphors. Also something you have in common with Apple. Steve Jobs, when he launched the iPod, he said, this iPod, 10,000 songs in your pocket. Not talking in features, in metaphors. So could you say that that's also something that you consistently use?
I mean, we're never going to get a better line than 1,000 songs in your pocket. I mean, I think
it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a good one. No, I personally love a metaphor, but I think sometimes I can go down rabbit holes, and people never know what the hell I'm on about. But I love to I love to sort of explain things in emotions more than facts.
Yeah. Now, your go-to-market strategy also changed a little bit from doing solely direct sales to now also working together, partnering up with brick and mortar stores. Now, this change kind of reduces your margin. So where does this decision come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the first thing to say is that everything should be driven by the customer, right? And it sounds all worthy and all the rest of it. I think it's actually also cynical, right? If you make an amazing customer experience, then you are more successful as a business. So I'm not saying it to try and, give some sort of worthy answer. But if you give more choice, more places to try the bike, more places to service the bike, then there is an immediate value there. We, as a company, led the way with mobile test rides. You can order a test ride to your home or to your office for free. We led the way with mobile technicians. So if
did people use that a lot, the test rides at home?
Yeah, I would say I think about 30% of all our sales come from someone who's done a test ride at home. But so we kind of set out to do those things, but we soon realized that there are, firstly, in Europe, there are about 10,000 independent bike shops, right? It's a very fragmented market with incredible, some not great, some incredible stores. They're supremely passionate. They are possibly more knowledgeable, certainly more knowledgeable than me, but more knowledgeable than our...
But you're talking about cycling in Belgium. It's a real thing.
Yeah, so people love it. And, their coffee is better than most people's coffee. So it was a natural step to kind of work with them. From a margin point of view, the lion's share of our business is still with direct-to-consumer, through our own stores, through our own website and things like that. So it felt like a good step, and the balance is pretty good.
But of course, these shops also have to fit your brand. So how do you select these type of shops where you also sell your Cowboys?
Again, another good question. So I was in Amsterdam yesterday showing some people around some of our partner stores. And I think if you'd have asked me, I haven't thought this through, but I think if you'd have asked me this on Monday, I would have given you a more pure answer, which is about, perfect branding and perfect, everything has to be just so. But the truth is we have some shops in Amsterdam that are phenomenal, but if I was in charge of them, I wouldn't do it exactly like they've done it, right? There's some elements that are, I don't think they would mind me saying, are sort of imperfect if you're being a purist about how things are presented. But fucking hell, the energy that they have in these shops because of the authenticity is incredible. And so my realization from yesterday was that if you're a brand, you have to behave and walk and talk and act like a brand, and you can't. You have to have various brand standards and tone of voice guidelines, and to have a consistency so everyone can understand it. What's amazing about having partners is they can kind of break some of the rules at the edges and create their own authenticity. So as of yesterday, I kind of I think it's about the energy they're creating more than getting everything absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Nice insights. Thank you. So from margins, we jump to financials, and a lot has been said and written about Cowboy's burn rate, claiming that you guys will have a challenge to become profitable. So what's your take on this, and how do you think that you should address this moving forward?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I'm happy you asked it. When I think about burn rate, I think about one of our very first investors, Alexei, who has a VC fund called Hardware Club, and he's invested with us all the way through. He's always been on our board, and he talks about climate as being a hardware problem, and I think this is important. He says that we're going to solve climate with things like farm to table, things like carbon capture, things like maybe nuclear. It's unlikely that we will solve this giant problem with a laptop and an internet connection, and so you then come onto this, I'm a bit of a magpie. You then come onto this thing that I heard Jeff Bezos say, which is that the only reason we could have a Facebook is because the telco companies laid all the cabling, right, so that we could have internet. So you have this investment in hardware that allows these things that come along. Ultimately, the point is that hardware is hard, right, but it's really important, and it is expensive. And so from Cowboy's point of view, we have invested and spent and burned, if you want to call it a burn rate, we've invested and spent a lot of capital setting up the infrastructure to pioneer a new category. And that is things like tooling, that is things like industrial design, 7 years of getting supply chain relationships perfect, software networks and service networks to enable all of the stuff we've talked about. from a profitability point of view, we're making very fast progress now. So our losses last year were 8 million less than the year before. This year, H2, we will be profitable. And next year, full year, we'll be profitable. So if you think about that as a journey, it's very fast. So that's my view.
Okay, so next year there's going to be an article. Yes, Cowboy is profitable.
There will.
So nice. The continuous search for funding can also be quite stressful for a startup. How do you experience that?
I think it is stressful. I think it's more stressful for CEOs and for CFOs than it is for CMOs. I think anyone who's raised money in the audience will, most anyone that you talk to that's in startup, if you're the person in charge of that and someone says, what do you do? If you're the person in charge of the CEO, it's like, I spend most of my time raising money, and how is it? Oh, it's exhausting. So anyone in the audience who's done that will know that it is tough and it is hard. I think it's a necessary reality of being a startup. Like, the definition is that you need cash in order to get profitable. And then when you're profitable, you stand on your own 2 feet and off you go. And maybe there's a growth capital stage in the middle, or an ability to grow through private equity or whatever it is. As a CMO, it's actually about focus and storytelling, right? It's like you have to really focus in and get what are the USPs, what is the story, get it really perfect, which is good discipline. So I actually don't mind it.
But that's also an important lever towards investors. So I can assume you've all also been very involved in funding rounds from the marketing perspective.
For sure, yeah. But again, it's a different audience, but it's the same essential job. Yeah. We're essentially saying, this is why we think this is an exciting company.
Yeah, building trust,
which is no different to saying it to these guys to try and say the bike is exciting.
Yeah. All right. Now, let's look at the future.
Okay.
Of Cowboy. First of all, let's dive into the past again. If for the future you would change anything about Cowboy, about lessons learned in the past, what would that be?
I think great business leaders sit. I'm not a great business leader. Great business leaders sit on stage and have really pithy, fail fast, or hire slowly, fire fast. I think the truth is that on the one hand, there's only 7 stories in the world, right? And so you should be able to get to a pithy statement. On the other hand, I think that every business is really nuanced and really different. And then you layer it on top of something like COVID, which, I was chatting with Dimitri, who's on next. They make the incredible noise earplugs, in-ear earplugs, totally different to a bike, but they had completely different challenges that came from COVID that we did. So you layer a nuanced business on top of what feels like it's been more crazy than maybe when I was a kid. Maybe I'm just paying more attention. And I think it's always nuanced and it's always hard. I think if I could change one thing, it's quite a glib answer, but I would love to go back to the start of COVID and fill our coffers of stock, because there was a huge demand in COVID for bikes and no one was ready for it. Yeah. But I think, the reality is it's been a complete roller coaster and we have to adapt. Everyone has to adapt in their own way.
Survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah. Now, Cowboy identifies as a tech company, but given the challenges that are facing the tech industry, do you believe it's the best way to position yourself right now?
I don't love the question. I love you.
Well, thanks, Rich.
No, I don't mean it against yourself, but I think if you kind of have rant alert, if you forgive the rant, right?
Yeah.
The reason that I don't like the question is that I don't think it matters whether Cowboy is a tech company or a hardware company or a software company or a micromobility company, right? I don't think that matters to us, and I don't think it matters to investors or the public. I think actually it does matter to journalists, because I think they like to kind of have an easy bucket. But I think that anyone else who is looking, and I think customers and crowd investors and investors, they look really carefully. I think they can see that what we're doing is making bikes and trying to get people on short journeys and longer journeys on bikes. I don't actually think it matters, or I don't think it's surprising to people that a startup would spend capital, would invest capital and need support. And so from my point of view, this kind of major message almost is it doesn't really matter how we're positioned or any of that stuff. What matters is that if you drove here today, then you are going to have arrived here slower than if you'd have been in a horse and cart, which the car was built to replace. And so my message that I'm banging on, I don't even care if you buy a Cowboy.
We're going to go back to horse and cart.
Yeah, I don't even care if you buy a Cowboy. I'd love you to buy a Cowboy, but I think if you go away today with one message, it's like, at the very least for the short journeys, just do it on a bike. And I know that we are in a very bikey country or bikey city, but Belgium, Brussels is still the 10th most congested city in the world. I read the other day the king was late for a meeting because he was stuck in traffic. It's like, what the hell is going on? So yeah, that's my message.
Yeah, Antwerp as well, so.
Yeah.
All right. You've been scaling this company pretty fast. What are the most important challenges that you've experienced while scaling Cowboy?
Well, we were just, Dimitri again, he's coming on next. We were just chatting about scale, and we were chatting about behavioral change. And I definitely don't want to steal his lines, but if you're trying to talk about in-ear things, it's a behavioral change. In the same way, an electric bike is the beginnings of a category change. That is a really hard thing to do. It's a really hard thing to do. And you can start at the edges. So older people, it makes a lot of sense that they loved riding a bike, and now it's a little bit easier when they get a little bit older. To bring it into our demographic now is, I looked this morning, our average age is 39 across, and we have a bell curve really over that sort of curve. If you talk to our number one store in Amsterdam, he'd tell you that it's 20 to 30, it's a different demographic. From my point of view, that's the hard thing. Again, I'm sure it's the same with Dimitri, what it's the same with us is you've got these macro forces that are happening, right? So with political, with cultural, with regulation changes, with the idea that, as I mentioned, like it is, there's a fitness element, there's a cost element, there's an environmental. I sort of position these two things in my mind. One is like it's really hard to change behavior, but on the other hand, these powerful forces, much more powerful than any of us, are kind of driving forward. And so if we can kind of catch that wave, then I think we'll be doing well.
All right. One final question. How do you prepare Cowboy to remain adaptable and resilient in an ever-evolving market? Because we already talked about survival of the fittest, but how do you practice this in your company?
So, I mean, look, I think we talked about raising capital, we talked about burn rate. This was easier in the zero interest rate period, the ZIRP period, right? I think the best thing that's happened to us is the end of that ZIRP period, right? Because of exactly your point. It forces you to adapt or die. It forces you to get really super fit, really disciplined, and really, really careful. For us, it's lucky because we have been able to invest in this platform and this infrastructure, so we can now leverage that. We can operate much more leanly. You mentioned I ran a creative agency, and I remember when I don't know if it's a dirty word here. It's definitely a dirty word in the UK. When Brexit happened, most people I knew were really sad about it, and I think more people are sad about it now than they were. But I was running an agency, and I remember the market started to tank, and I was looking at companies that had succeeded in a down market. And I looked at the end of the Great Depression, 1929. I looked at the Second World War, and you have Porsche started in 1930, Lego in 1932, Sony in 1946, Christian Dior in 1947. There's some incredible companies that start. So if you can survive and thrive in a hard market, it's like training at altitude, right? You're just fitter. So my view on it is like we've been in the jungle for the last 2 years, like eating nuts and like doing bodyweight exercises. And I feel excited. I feel excited about the next year.
All right. We're also looking forward to the journey of Cowboy. Now, thank you, Richard, for being here and for sharing your insights of your entrepreneurial journey. So people, please show him some love and give an applause to Richard Ascott from Cowboy.